So you have heard me use the word clarity. I mean, probably quite a few times in this last couple of videos. So we are now on lesson 4, where we're talking about clarity. Specifically, you're going to hear me say the word clarity probably in every single lesson and in every single module, because to me, one of the biggest issues that couples have is making assumptions. So, and I mean, that's a problem, I think, just in general as humans, is that we tend to make assumptions about others, how they are, how they're going to be, everything, how they think, how they feel, right? So very, very often, someone will tell me more about how their partner feels about something than how they feel about it. You know, they'll say, well, I know that he or she feels this way. And my response to that is now, always. It's a really good question. And they're like, what? I was like, well, you kind of told me how your partner feels, but I actually think that would be a much better question. And not just, well, do you think that way? Because that's usually like the way that someone comes back from that. But to say, you know, I have noticed that when I make plans socially, I have this I perceive you to be, you get a little tight, intense, and I then take that as you not wanting me to go anywhere. Like, what am I getting that right? I need clarity, because otherwise, because what might be is that the partner hopefully can say, okay, I get that. I get that that's how that is coming across. And that is probably how I am putting that out there. But there might be more to it. There might be more layers to it. And if the question of clarity was never asked, we never could get to the complexity and the levels and the layers. And we just sit up here that we've made the assumption, right? So I make an assumption and then solidify that assumption into fact. I then start telling my partner, yes, that is in fact how they, and then I'll provide all the evidence as to why that is in then fact. And then I respond and react to my partner based upon that fact that was really an assumption. Had I stopped and gotten clarity, more often than not, you're going to find your assumption was incorrect or didn't have the correct connections in the way that you're making them. And you are taking them, and instead of having maybe a causality, you are having it be, instead of having it be correlationally, you're having it be causality. So that is causing this. And then that's it. There's no clarity. There's no getting into the depths of it. I need to understand where, yes, it might be some of that, but it also has to do with this other thing. And then when you ask the question of clarity to get rid of the assumption and your partner answers you, I understand why at times this is hard, but we need to believe our partner. Right? So if like this keeps happening over time and your partner's not telling the truth and they keep asking you to believe your partner, well, then that's a different conversation. But for right now, I'm under the assumption, again, I'm assuming that we are all in a fairly functional place mentally in our life that we can see these things and that we're not lying. And that we're actually able to say and take some level of responsibility, which we're going to get into later. And say, yeah, I could totally see how that would lead you to have that feeling. That makes sense. So I got to pay attention to that. Let me explain a little bit more, or let me kind of give you this other perspective of it. But first I came in and I understood some level how and why that assumption came to be. And then I'm making the clarity. And then my partner needs to believe me. Because if they don't, what's the point? You're getting clarity, but you're getting clarity because you're looking for the evidence to fit with what you think. You're looking for my answer to back up your theory. And then when it doesn't, it's like, well, no, but because my assumption is just so I've solidified it into fact. So when you tell me that's not it, it doesn't make sense to me. Because I have already created and I've looked for the evidence and it all makes sense to me. So anything contrary to that doesn't. So I need us to kind of debunk all of this to say, I cannot just say, well, based upon everything you've done, we can say, hey, like this is what you're saying versus maybe how I'm experiencing you are not aligned. Can we talk about that? Going way ahead of myself. But it's so, 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 so important that if we hear ourselves even saying, well, I think you feel this way, or, I think you think this way, that we allow our partner, because it's what they think and feel, they have some say in that. That very often when I'm like, hey, that's a really good question, and they're like, okay, and then they do ask the question, the partner's like, no, it's not how I feel. And again, it's hard to believe because you're basing this and you're making those assumptions into facts. But if you never stopped and got clarity, then you could have years of assumptions that you've solidified into fact and have been responding and reacting to those that have been incorrect. And so now we're like, I didn't get this clarity 4 years ago. And now I'm having a really hard time grasping and believing it because it's not what I carried with me these last 4 years. Moving forward into this, even more into this relationship. I've taken all of those assumptions that I've solidified into fact and I've carried them with me. So now it's even harder for me to accept that those were assumptions I made that actually were not rooted in how you really think and feel. Or I never got into and dove in with you to get into the complexities, into the nuances. Where it isn't black and white. Like sometimes, yes, I feel that way. Sometimes no. When we stop and we get clarity and we slow down and we ask questions, so often I will hear them be like, oh, wow, well, that's really good. I'm really glad to know that you also want to do that. And it was like, guys, like, how did we not come to this on our own? And it's because we see things, we take things personal. They didn't answer my question when maybe they didn't hear me. And so I'm assuming they're mad or they're giving me the silent treatment or they're not happy with me or whatever. And they're not happy with me because I didn't clean up the kitchen. And how dare they get mad at me? I have to work too. And what are they thinking? And how selfish. And now I've created a whole storyline. And I've put my partner in that starring role of the antagonist as the villain in that story. I didn't ever stop to be sure that is the role that they wanted to play. But when I keep putting them in that role, then sometimes they become that role because I have solidified my assumptions into fact, and I cannot believe that you're telling me those assumptions were wrong and that I have carried with me and reacted to and responded to and have created a storyline over. How is that not the reality? So we got to break this. Clarity is assumptions kryptonite. We need to start getting clarity. And very often I'll just say, guys, we have to talk through these things. So, hey, I'm getting clarity right now. And I say that to my clients all the time. Hey guys, I'm just getting some clarity real quick because I got a little bit lost. And so I'm assuming this, but I want to make sure this thing. And they're always so grateful because then they can say, no. Yeah, okay, I can see how you came with that. But no, let me back that up a little bit and let me kind of clear that up. so that I didn't hear something, make my own personal bias assumption, something, carry that with us forward into further dialogue, and then make a false assumption and potentially really hurt my clients because of an assumption I made. Because I didn't stop and get the clarity. So I always stop and get the clarity with my couples. It's highly important. I also find it to be important because I am modeling what getting clarity looks like. And I use that language. I use the actual words. Guys, I'm going to get clarity here. Because maybe before you told me this. So in a relationship, it's like, hey, I'm going to get clarity because old me would have made some assumptions based upon history. And again, probably assumptions within that history. So I'm going to ask for a little bit of clarity. My hope is that we don't annoyed with that of like, but it's like, oh, cool, great. Because now again, we are working with the right information. There's nothing that I've seen piss somebody off more. I mean, there may be some things, but when you tell another person how they think or what they feel, shuts them down every time. Well, if you're just going to talk for me, and you always just assume that's what I'm thinking, you always think the worst of me. So we get into these very process-oriented conflicts, which are about how we fight, not about the actual issue. And almost always it's because of these assumptions. So what I would love for you to do is kind of read over again what I wrote in the little lecture area. I feel like it's really important. And in the homework, what I really want you to do is think about what are some assumptions that I have made about my partner or about this relationship, marriage. What questions can I ask to seek some clarity in those assumptions? And then, what's the new understanding of this topic, this issue, anything, with the thought, that's the feeling? What is my new understanding of this now that I have asked and sought through clarifying questions? I'm trying to learn, be attuned, love map. What is the new understanding? And then, I don't have this on there, but how is that conflicting with your internal working model of what this marriage is and who this person is? Does it conflict? Does it align? Check in with that, because I think that's also really important. And another piece of information just for your own self-awareness and self-growth as we go through this process. All right. I haven't said this yet, but if there's ever any questions as you guys are going through this course or any of the lectures, the lessons, the modules, you are always welcome to reach out to me through email, and it should be all over this classroom, but I'm just going to verbally say it to you right now, which is my first name, Beth, B-E-T-H, at BethWileyTherapy.com. So Wiley is spelled W-Y-L-I-E, which is often very hard. So it's Beth at BethWileyTherapy.com. I welcome questions or clarity, right? Clarifying questions. If any part of this is confusing or you feel like you are not on the path in the direction you want to be on, please reach out. That is what I am here to do, is to help provide that clarity so you don't get down making assumptions as to what you're supposed to be doing and then feel like you've gotten this wrong. Enjoy. This is also supposed to be fun. When you're finding that you're becoming any level of overwhelm or this is too much, take a break, right? Not forever. I think I need to take a break from this today. I'm going to come back to it tomorrow. That is okay. But what I don't want you to do is become so overwhelmed that you shut it all down. Take the day and see what happens the following day. All right. Thank you.